I'm alive because
I'm alive because
I'm alive.
I have my 5 awesome kids.
I'm alive because
I'm still alive today because I heard your podcast.
Hi, friends. Welcome to your first Mini Monday podcast episode. I'm your host, Sarah, and thanks so much for listening to the I'm Alive Because podcast. So on Mini Mondays, we're just going to be taking a few minutes, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes to talk about practical solutions or interventions or tools or really anything that you can do that will improve your mental health and your overall wellness. I know that sometimes, we can feel really lost in how to navigate mental health struggles. And so I want these Mini Monday episodes to just be something that you can walk away from and apply. I want them to be really tangible and practical and just give you ideas because, we all struggle sometimes. And so if you are at a place where you're like, wow, I don't know how to be happy right now, or I don't know how to cope right now, or I don't know how to stop being anxious right now. Like any one of those questions is valid, and I want you to walk away with potentially some solutions. So, with that being said, today I want to talk about one of my favorite skills, and one of the skills that I've found the most helpful in my life, and that is called the Cope Ahead Plan. So, coping ahead is a skill identified in DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a kind of cousin to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very common modality used in mental health counseling. But essentially, DBT just believes that if you change your behavior, you can change your feelings, or you can lessen them, or you can manage them. And so I've had a lot of DBT therapy. It's been something that's been really, really great for me. And it's something that I try to teach to others. So let's talk about what coping ahead is. Coping ahead is essentially pre-planning crisis, which might seem counterintuitive to avoiding crisis. It's really easy to not think about, talk about, or, fantasize about, for lack of a better term, crisis, or feeling like your life is falling apart or things aren't going well, or, things are on the edge of not going well. But coping ahead really allows you to have a plan for what will happen if you begin to notice yourself going into crisis, or if you're there. And so once you notice or you are there, having a plan can reduce the anxiety or stress or trauma that comes from that crisis, because you already know how to handle it. Those are big words, right? Trauma, crisis, all of those things. But essentially, we can apply this to our everyday life by just identifying the things that we interact with, the people we interact with, the situations that we interact with that cause us anxiety or stress or frustration or whatever it is, and have a plan to put in place for managing that. And so then we're far more prepared to address whatever, that event is that's coming up, because we have a plan. So what this looks like is identifying the problem area, right? So I'm going to work through an example with you. And that is that for a year, my wife and I were working in 2 different states, about 4 hours away from each other. And we were living kind of in the middle of that. So we were living in Portland, and I was working out of Seattle, South Seattle. And every Friday, I would come home from a week of being away, and we would have the weekends together back at home. And so, all week it would be like this anticipation, this excitement building that, oh my gosh, in 2 days, in 1 day, okay, today is the day I'm going to go see my wife and go back to my life, and it'll be great. And what ended up happening was every Friday night we would get in these arguments, and we had no idea why, because obviously we were really excited to see each other. So that seems weird. Like, why, after a week of saying how much we miss each other and can't wait to see each other, are we all of a sudden like not even interested in hanging out? Um, and I did a lot of work around this, and what I realized was my Friday night drive was really hard. So I would sit in several hours of traffic just to get like to Olympia, and then it'd be another 2 hours home. So sometimes on Fridays this would be like a 4 or 5 hour car ride, just depending on how bad the traffic was. After a really long week of working, being away from all of my social supports, my dog, by the time I got home, I was just like over it. And the last thing I wanted to do, even though I love her so much, was interact with my wife. Because after having been in a high stress work environment for a week, to sitting in the car and getting super annoyed by it, um, to then getting home to her being like in my face and wanting to talk and wanting to interact and hang out, I was like, you need to get away from me. And that sounds awful, but it's okay that that's how I felt, because I was really overwhelmed. And so every Friday we were arguing. And finally, I took this to my therapist and I was like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm this terrible person because I keep picking these fights. And we dissected it a bit and we realized that I was just very overwhelmed and I needed some time to be able to transition back into the household. So we identified the problem area being Friday night transitioning home. And so my therapist asked me, in your perfect world, what would it look like to manage that really stressful situation of transitioning home after a long work week and feeling like you have to immediately interact with someone? And I said, I really just need time. So I just need time. And she said, well, what does that look like? And I said, really, I need Tori to leave. And I want to be able to park in the garage because I don't want to have to carry my bags inside. And she said, okay, well, what else? And I said, well, it'd be really nice if I didn't have to cook dinner. So all of these funny things, right? Like these very simple things. And she said, okay, so you have your problem. You guys are having a hard time transitioning back together. You have what you feel like will work for you, right? You need time by yourself. You need to not have to cook, and you need to be able to park inside the garage so that you don't have to carry your things back and forth after this really long day. And my therapist said, those are really valid things, Sarah. So now you need to communicate with your wife about this and kind of come up with an agreement. And so we did. And of course, she has the right to kind of tweak things and change things. And so we ended up agreeing on Friday nights, I would come home. I would get an hour by myself in the bedroom to just decompress and lay. She would go out and pick up takeout for us so that when she came back in an hour, we could come back together and kind of have like a date night or something to look forward to. Um, and I think there was something else, but I don't remember now because it's been a while. But every Thursday night or like Friday morning, we would text each other and be like, okay, today is the day. Really excited to see you, but just want to make sure we're on plan with our Cope Ahead plan. And so that Tori would remember what the plan was, so that I would remember what the plan was and check in and make sure if things needed to be changed or adjusted. And once we started implementing the Friday Cope Ahead plan, we stopped fighting. And it was really like as simple as that. And so that's an example of how you can implement a Cope Ahead plan in your relationship. But there's plenty of ways you can do this on your own. So for example, if you know that you're attending an event that's going to be really anxiety producing, you could have a plan to exit as necessary. So come up with some sort of like, not an excuse, but a statement for what to tell people if you have to like immediately leave a situation, or plan to take your medication with you in case you want to take a PRN to reduce your anxiety, or, all of these things that you can build in for yourself. And then most often what happens is you'll go to that event and you'll find that you didn't even have to use that pre-planned intervention, but just having that trick in your back pocket, having that Cope Ahead plan is super helpful. And so for example, in June, my wife and I got married, right? And so I spent probably 2 months leading up to the wedding going through cope ahead plans for different events with my therapist, and then going back and talking to my wife about them to make sure we were on the same page. Even the night before my wedding, had a meeting with our entire bless their hearts, with our entire wedding party and said, this is what I think the day is going to look like tomorrow. And I need to know what you guys think it's going to look like so that we can just make sure we're on the same page, because I want this to be the best day of my lives, right? Like our lives. So, I was able to kind of set my expectations, my boundaries, let people know what would happen if I felt overwhelmed or anxious, and also give Tori that time to talk. So, yeah, so those are two kind of examples of how I've used Cope Ahead for big events or for just small things like these Friday night arguments that we were having. And I talk to my friends about this all the time, like pre-planning crisis, pre-planning stress and how to manage it is going to help you so much, because all of that anxiety or that question asking that you have about, oh my gosh, what will I do if, when, what, why, like none of that occurs anymore because you already know. So, to take this and apply this, of course, you can do as much research as you want about coping ahead or cope ahead plans. I know there's documents and things like that you could write your plans on, but really this is simple stuff, and I found it to be really helpful. So I hope that you could walk away from your first mini Monday episode and know that coping ahead is a tool you can use in the event that you need it. Thank you so much for listening to this mini Monday episode. I hope that it was helpful. You learned something. You are ready to apply it. If you are, I would love if you would let us know how it's going, what you need, what kinds of mini Monday episodes you'd like to hear about. Just let us know. Talk to us. You can find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at A Brand for the Broken. And if you are interested in joining any of our podcasts, please, you can find the form to fill out a request to be featured on the podcast on our website or on our Instagram page. I would love to talk to you, host you, hear your story. As always, please rate, subscribe, review, tell your friends, family, loved ones about the I'm Alive Because podcast, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.